This is episode number 15 of the Expert Table Tennis Podcast with me, Ben Larcombe. And on today's show, I'm joined by Kevin Korb, who is the amazing 19-year-old brand new owner of the TopSpin, which is a full-time table tennis club in California. I got Kevin on the show to talk about how he went about buying the club and what his plans are for the place over there. Kevin's also got a rather interesting story, having taken up the sport seriously relatively late at university, college for those American guys, and then improved very quickly. He got up to a 2000 rating in the US within about a year and a half, playing at college with the other guys at the USC team. So we're going to be talking about the club, talking about how Kevin was able to improve so quickly. I'm sure you're going to get loads from the episode, whether you're interested in clubs and starting clubs, which I know a lot of you are, or if you're just interested in how to improve your table tennis skills quickly. Kevin's got a lot of information to share. Let's get into the interview. So I'm joined today on the show by Kevin Korb from California. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Ben.
Great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And you are currently at your club, which is called the TopSpin, which you're the owner of.
Exactly.
How did that come about, and how long have you been involved with the TopSpin?
So I actually didn't even know the club. Well, the club had been around for 8 years and was actually the first full-time ping pong club founded in the Bay Area, locally back in California. And the owner who had been running it, his name was Tung Nguyen. His kids had grown up. He was commuting from far away and was just ready to move on to the next kind of step in his life, and was planning on closing it June 1st. And I actually didn't find out about it until May 15th, around that time. And things moved forward very fast. But my parents and I met with owners and the landlord and worked out enough at the time in order to save the club, and are moving forward from there and have lots of big plans for the future.
So you've now bought the club off this guy, and you're the owner. You're kind of in charge of sorting everything out for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the head honcho.
And how old are you, Kevin?
I turned 20 in a month.
So you're currently 19 years old.
Exactly.
That's quite a big task, isn't it, to take on?
It is. I'm actually taking a year off of college. I've been at school at the University of Southern California down in Los Angeles. But I'm taking a year off to grow and develop the club. And the goal is to return in a year and have the club more stable. And then after I graduate, come back and return to run it full time.
Cool. Well, I guess in many ways, this is the dream of a lot of people, to have their own kind of full-time club that they can then pretty much just go and do whatever they want with. What are your plans for the club? What are you hoping to do with it?
Kind of the way we're trying to take it is a movement called that I'm calling table tennis to the masses. And for so long in the United States, it is, I think, a little bit different internationally. But in the U.S., table tennis is so unpopular. And for so long, it's been kind of a sport played by pockets of communities, but no one really knows it exists. And so what I'm trying to do is make it something that anyone would want to come play. And we're launching our TopSpin Academy coaching programs, which will do a lot to, I hope, bring in all sorts of new recreational players, expose them to the sport, and hopefully give them a chance to become more involved. We'll also do birthday parties, corporate events. We'll have adult group lessons. We do a Saturday league. And we're also the best club in the Bay Area for open play. We have 18 tables. It's a 13,000 square foot facility, and super high ceilings, great lighting. It's a real neat place to play.
Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome. So clubs generally tend to either focus on participation and getting lots of people playing, or they focus on just kind of a handful of players, trying to get them really good, kind of creating a small number of top players. Would you say that your vision with the TopSpin is the participation side of things?
I think it's a combination of both, because I think table tennis as a sport involves both sides, the competitive side and the more recreational play. So part of how I see it developing is that we'll have our higher level, more serious players be a part of the club, and the larger, more recreational foundation will help support and keep the club running so that we can boast a very competitive team. And part of it is we'll have group lessons with lots and lots of players, and that's what will go on in the club on the weekend mornings. And then we'll also have our higher level academy classes as well as a TopSpin cadet program. And those will be the top players of our club who we arrange some sort of sponsorship deal and get them to play for us more seriously and represent our club at national competitions.
Okay, so you're going to be doing everything at this club. I guess you've got the space there to run loads of different programs at the same time.
Exactly.
Is it run kind of as a business? Like how does the club work? Because I know in the UK most clubs are kind of run as a non-profit kind of. It's a bit of a strange situation, but in the US are clubs mainly done as a business instead of as kind of like a community project?
It does vary. There's another one nearby called the ICC. That's one of the other larger clubs, and they, I know, are run as a nonprofit, but they're set up through the Indian Community Center. We're at the TopSpin just set up as a company, and that's the way I think most of the clubs around here are set up.
So you've now taken on the role of kind of a businessman / entrepreneur type character.
Exactly.
And what's life going to be like? Because I guess you must be on kind of college summer break now. Is that what you call it over there?
If I had been going back to school, it would start next Monday.
But instead, you're now going to take the next year off to really work on this project. So what's kind of the average week going to be like for you next year, do you think?
Mm-hmm. I'll probably be at the club at least 6 or 7 days of the week for a good portion of my time each day, either working the front desk or working on other projects for the club. But I do also get a good amount of time to play and practice, and that's been really neat because there's always such a good selection of high-level players here to train with that I've already this summer, in the last 2 months that I've been here, had a big jump in play level from all my practice. But in addition to running the club, I'll have the chance. It will be a little different because lots of friends are still at school, but I'll be able to pursue a little bit of my other passions and play around with some music and do some more drawing and art. But it'll be a lot of ping pong, and I'm excited for it.
Now, it sounds like your life has just kind of like completely been taken over by table tennis recently, but I know that it didn't always used to be like that, did it? Kind of going back a few years, you weren't that involved in table tennis. So what led to this kind of sudden passion for table tennis for you, Kevin?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So I grew up in Northern California, and when I was real little, 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that, I had always wanted to start playing more table tennis, and we would play in the garage with my dad and my brother and my grandpa, and we were decent recreational players, but not high level competitive players. But when I was little, the nearest club, because 10, 11, 12 years ago, it really wasn't that big in the U.S. The nearest club was an hour away or more, and it was only open certain days of the week, and it just didn't work out for me to start playing. So I grew up playing other sports, basketball, volleyball, soccer. And then in high school, I played volleyball more seriously. And all through high school, I played. Going into college, I was hoping to continue playing volleyball. Even though at 6'2", I was considered on the short side.
Oh, really? What, 6'2" is short for volleyball?
For volleyball, yeah, in college. Even I had a 38-inch vertical, so I jumped very high. But with that and at 6'2", I was too short. I would have had to change positions. But what happened is I ended up hurting my back exercising, and for about 6 months I couldn't arch it, and that stopped me from practicing. And in the downtime while I was recovering, I started to play with USC's table tennis team, the ping pong posse, and loved it. And we would pull out 10 tables into our gym for practice, and I had never seen anything like it before. And I was instantly hooked. But I took over as the president of the club by the second semester of my freshman year, and then the summer after my freshman year, launched my social media accounts as well as my website, kevinstabletennis.com. And kind of over the next semester, the first semester of my sophomore year, the Instagram account took off, and the rest is now kind of, I guess, history. And I'm real happy with how things have worked out to get me to this point, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Do you think that the kind of the USC kind of whole table tennis stuff there was really what got you hooked on it? It seems like they've got quite an interesting setup over there.
Yeah, it really was. It really still is a neat and great community of people there. There's all levels of players. I showed up at the first practice, and we had people coming out and playing for the first time, and we had one player on our team. His name's Grant Lee, and he was on the team for the U.S. that went to the World Championships this year, and is now actually his rating is over 2,600, so he's one of the highest rated U.S.-born players right now, after beating a 2,700 something Chinese player who had come from overseas in a recent tournament, and just being exposed to all levels of table tennis and seeing and being able to ask for help and get pointers from people who had been playing for years and knew what they were doing. All of a sudden, I realized that table tennis was much more of a serious and competitive thing than I at first thought it was. And
because you've been playing a bit beforehand, hadn't you? Did you have a rating kind of before you got involved with table tennis at college?
I didn't, but basing kind of my rating off a estimated rating off of how I performed playing against the club members, I probably would have fallen somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200, or 1,000 and 1,300. But I really had minimal technique and played a very defensive style with not much spin, and would kind of keep balls on the table until people missed. But if someone had really any training and could just hit the same shot routinely, it would put me out of position, and I ran into trouble.
So a couple of years ago, you were pretty much just a self-taught ping pong player, really.
Exactly. Still to this point, I'm pretty much a self-taught ping pong player. I've never had any real coaching other than asking friends and other players for tips from time to time.
But then you got yourself up very quickly into even breaking the kind of 2,000 rating mark, didn't you? How did you manage to do that?
Mm-hmm. So I did play a lot of ping pong, and probably during my freshman year and sophomore year I got a little busier, but I was probably playing somewhere between 3 to 5 days a week for an hour or two, sometimes more each time. And the biggest thing for me, because I didn't have a coach, is that I had to figure out some way to make sure my technique was correct and that I was moving in the right direction. So I really am a big believer in self-correcting. So when I first started out, what I would do is I would get pointers from players like Grant or Adam Bobrow and ask them, how do you hit a loop? And they would kind of show me the way your hips and your arm and your wrist all have to move in sync together. And then also pointed me towards some helpful videos of some of the top players, Timo Boll or Ma Long, slow motion form from YouTube videos where I was able to watch, and I'd pay attention to how their feet moved, and then pay attention to how their knees moved, all the way up their body. And then as I play, and still to this day, on almost every shot I take, I'm always thinking and trying to correct what I did wrong with the stroke. And the other thing that I really feel is important is that you can't worry about losing in practice. And I've lost more matches than I can count. And especially when I began to play and started playing against more competitive players who had received real training, I had no loop, I had no block. So I had to not use my old technique, but try to start working my way up and use the proper technique, and have since then developed a loop and developed a block. But I'm a firm believer in a saying that an old volleyball coach of mine used to say to me, and it was, that practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And along those lines, unless you practice something correctly, you're going to learn the wrong technique, and then you won't be able to use it when you need to in a game. So I would come, actually, before I took over as the owner of this club a year and a half ago, when I would be back for summer break or Christmas break, I'd come play here and lose all 6 matches I played that day. But as long as I was playing the correct form and really working on developing my shots, I'd be happy with the 3 good loops I hit that day. And since then, I've gotten more consistent, and I'm still working to improve that. And I hope to keep moving up in the future.
Yeah, I think what you touched on there is really important for players that have been in your situation where they've kind of played recreationally. Suddenly they realize that there's this whole world of proper technique and training and all of that. And then they're kind of stuck between, they could win perhaps using kind of their old ways, or do they lose using their new techniques, and what's the best way to go about it? And I think what you said there, to kind of like not worry too much about winning or losing, focus on, are you playing in the matches kind of the correct way that you want to play, and then just kind of let it come over time, and you are just going to have to lose matches, but eventually it's going to pay off. And is it, that sounds kind of like that's what you found, is it?
Exactly, yeah. And also, as I started to play USATT sanctioned tournaments, my first tournament I lost all my matches. My second tournament I think I maybe won 1. But I realized, even after playing other sports competitively and in tournaments, it was different for me to be able to play aggressive table tennis under pressure, and play the way I needed to play and wanted to play, and the way that I had played in practice just didn't come naturally in tournaments. I too quickly reverted to my older style, and would try to keep balls on the table but wouldn't add any spin to it, or do anything that would make it more difficult on my opponent, and wound up often not doing too well. And it took time and more practice on the right technique. But eventually what's happened since then is I have gotten more comfortable being aggressive in moments where I'm under pressure or deuce in the fifth, and I need to make a good opening ball off of their serve. And now I'm working on being that aggressive in times where I'm not under pressure at 2-2 in the match. So I'm trying to piece together both sides of it and hopefully end up with a more complete game.
And you're still doing plenty of training, I assume, now at the club?
Exactly. Now I have the chance to play almost every day and get pretty good practice in most times.
So what kind of goals are you setting for yourself and your level going forwards?
I think the best way to describe my involvement is that I play ping pong because I have more fun doing it than anything else. At the same time, because I enjoy it and because I'm spending so much time doing it, I want to become the best I can be. So kind of to this point in my advancement, I had set goals for myself. Hit 1800 by the end of freshman year, which I made after the last college nationals tournament. Hit 2000 by my sophomore year, second semester, which I managed to do. And kind of the goal that I'm working on right now was to hit 2200 by the end of the summer. And although I haven't played a tournament recently, I've been beating 21 to 2200 players of the club relatively consistently. So I've got high hopes for my next tournament. And going forward, it's something where, I mean, I understand the chances of it happening are slim to none, but it would be the coolest thing ever to make a national team. So kind of like kids do when they are little and dream about being in the national spotlight or the very best. I still have those passions, and if I get there, great. But if not, I'm still playing a sport I love, and I wouldn't be happier doing anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Samson Dabina earlier today, and he's 32, and he's currently doing his training to try and get into the kind of Olympic team for the 2016 Olympics over in Rio. So, I mean, it's one of those things with like with your age in table tennis, where you can kind of feel like it seems like everyone kind of feels like they're a bit too old.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that's really true at all. I think that's kind of like just a weird rumor that spreads, and it's just really damaging for because I remember thinking back to when I was 19, I'm 26 now, kind of thinking, oh, I'm not that good as a 19-year-old to actually go anywhere with it. I should kind of wind it down. But now looking back as a 26-year-old, you think, God, at 19, I was actually so young. Like, imagine if I'd spent 7 whole years training, like how good I'd be right now. So I think it's one of those things where you always feel like you're old, and then later on you'll look back and realize kind of like how young you were and how much you could have done.
I think I'm at a neat place right now, and it's been neat for me with where I started playing at the age of kind of 17, 18. Because I was at a point where, unlike how I would have been when I was little, I was much more interested in improving and much more focused on the technique and doing things correctly. And I also had a very good build for table tennis between a lot of legs, core, and shoulder work for volleyball.
Yeah, do you feel like the volleyball kind of helped you to improve really quickly in table tennis?
I think it did help to some extent because, like I mentioned, the legs and the core and the shoulder muscles really did transition somewhat to the motion. The motion of a swing or a loop. I was much stiffer, though, than I needed to be. And in volleyball, you don't want your arm completely tight, but it isn't as loose as a ping pong loop would be. So I had to kind of condition my body to understand that in order to swing harder, I had to be, in some senses, flexing muscles less hard or using different muscles. But it definitely has helped, I think, with some side-to-side movement and quick footwork.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. So if people are listening and thinking that they're kind of in a similar situation to you, Kevin, they're maybe in high school or college and they've never taken table tennis that seriously, but for whatever reason they've decided they want to get into it. What kind of advice would you give them as kind of a late starter to the sport that you think will really help them to catch up with the people that have been playing since they were young kids?
Mm-hmm. The first thing I'd say is ask as many questions as you can. Table tennis players are pretty friendly, and when I started to play, I would ask anyone, why did this ball travel this way, or why didn't my shot go on the table? And I realized as I was just beginning that people have been playing for years and years, and now as I've played more, I can understand that you really get a grasp of kind of the physics of the ball and how it travels off of your paddle and on the table. And a recreational player and someone who's just beginning, myself when I was just beginning, I had no grasp of that. So if it wasn't for me really seeking out answers and asking questions, I totally would have never caught on. The other thing I'd recommend is that you don't need to go spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on your first ping pong paddle. Some people end up deciding I'm going to get involved in ping pong and then buy the $140 Zhangjica butterfly blade. And it ends up, I think, doing more harm than good. They throw Tenergy rubber on there and they just get this paddle that's too fast for them to control, and they end up not learning any technique. So while I do think, and I would advise them to start getting a more serious professional paddle, because only with that will they really start being able to learn the spin and the speed and the different finesse aspects of the table tennis game. And then it's something that they have to understand does take time and does take work in order to improve and move up. But if they do stick to it and they're committed and interested and they enjoy it, they will move up. And it's just a matter of time and effort.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. In particular, the not getting the fastest bat that you can find, because that is gonna cause more harm than good. Just trying to play with a super fast bat when you haven't developed all your own control and feeling of the ball and everything. So get yourself kind of like an all round bat, and then just I guess do what you did. Try and play as much of table tennis as possible. Find players that you can ask for advice from, and that you can kind of watch and study and watch things online. Then it seems like that's worked for you, and it should really work for anyone that tries it out.
Hopefully.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to come on the show, Kevin. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you too as well. I enjoyed it very much.
Where's the club based, and how can people find out more about it?
We're located in San Jose, California, real close to the San Jose airport, actually. So if you ever fly in, we're about 2 minutes away. And people can learn more about it on our website, thetopspin.com. And we've got a brand new website, lots of good pictures of the club, and all sorts of information about our different programs and services that we have here.
And you're big on social media as well, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah, we're personally, I run all sorts of stuff, and I'm doing my part now to get the club social media pages up and running. So we're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well.
I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you can get up to with the club and how you're able to grow it. And I'm sure you're going to have loads of new ideas, and you'll end up with clubs all over the place copying what you're getting up to.
Thank you. I do too. I hope that as well.
And good luck with your own table tennis. I'll be following and watching your rating progress with your tournaments and everything.
Great. Thank you. And if I'm ever overseas, we'll get a match in sometime.
Yeah, if you're ever over in the UK, drop me a message and we can meet up somewhere.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin.
Have a good rest of your day.
See you later, buddy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Huge thank you to Kevin for coming on the show. The one point that I want to draw out from that is the way that Kevin was able to, being at university, get himself into a group of serious table tennis players right from the start, even when he would admit that he was largely just a hobby player himself. He managed to work his way into that group with players such as Grant Lee and Adam. And if you're able to get into that kind of situation with players that are playing seriously, that are happy to give you advice and tips, then I think you can get away with being largely self-taught. And Kevin hasn't had a huge amount of coaching. He's mainly just done this, with the internet, with YouTube, with talking to these guys, and kind of pieced it all together. And I think as long as you can get yourself in that kind of environment where you are surrounded by people playing correctly and who are happy to kind of give you tidbits of information here and there, then I think you can actually improve really quickly. And that's what Kevin's shown. He's young, he has a history of playing sports, so he's kind of got a nice base, and then he's been able to quickly improve his table tennis skills. And I'm sure he's going to continue improving now that he's able to spend the next year kind of training alongside managing the club. So really great interview. Kevin is a huge inspiration to any kind of like college players that want to start taking it seriously and haven't done so before. I think it would be great if college and university table tennis got much bigger and we saw people really taking up the sport at age 18 to 21 instead of just dropping out, which is what we see a lot. I'd really like to see college, university table tennis continue to grow and thrive. Thanks for listening to the show. As always, you can subscribe on iTunes. Please leave us a review if you are an iTunes user. And I will be back next week with a brand new guest on Friday. I will see you then.